Thank you all for coming today. I appreciate your attendance here. When I was trying to present and prepare for this, I was trying to come up with what would my intro be. And then thankfully this morning, one of the presenters gave me a great start. The speaker from the CIA talked about icebergs and not shifting legacy apps to the cloud, and et cetera. And talked about, hey, what you really should do is just rewrite all your apps and just move them natively. And well, if you have an unlimited budget that you can just hire an unlimited and undocumented number of people to do that, and enough budget to have AWS stand up your own secret private cloud, then that might be a good strategy. But if you're like the rest of us who have a budget in the, with 5 zeros or 6 zeros after it, and a limited number of resources, and a directive from your CIO to either move to the cloud, or shut down your data center, or switch from CapEx to OpEx, and do it all in the next 6 months, then you have to look for a more realistic and practical and plausible solution. And that's what I'm here to share with you, is a solution that VMware plus AWS have put together that our customers have said it is so awesome, it's ridiculous to not try it when we move to the cloud. You got to move to the cloud using this service and at least give it a try. And right now you're skeptical and you think I'm in a sales mode, which probably am, but fact of the matter is, let me share with you what we've done, what we're doing in our announcement today, and then afterwards, I think you'll agree with me. So, first of all, the partnership started a couple of years ago between VMware and AWS. Both companies decided that we have a massive opportunity ahead of us of helping VMware's customers, which is an enormous percentage of data center operators today, get to the cloud, and AWS needed to help their customers move to the cloud more quickly. So together, we have combined forces and came up with a truly differentiated offering, a completely new, game-changing opportunity in the industry, or solution in the industry. We have combined the leading virtualization, compute, storage, and network capabilities with support for the broadest workloads, the most certified, tested, proven workloads in the world, and have become the de facto standard for enterprise data centers. At the same time, AWS has provided the world's best cloud with flexible consumption economics, an unbelievable number of services, and a global scale and reach that's unmatched. So two companies looked at each other and said, this is a match made in heaven. How do we make the most of this? And what can we do to make our customers successful and delight them? So we came out with a service last year called VMware Cloud on AWS. And if you have a legacy application, let's just say something like Lotus Notes, or some other application that's built decades ago, and you try to move that to the cloud, you have the challenge of trying to figure out how you're going to even attack that, right? So first of all, if you are running an old application, you probably have to find a copy of Windows NT or whatever Lotus is still running on. And you can't just spin up a cloud instance running that because they don't exist. Wouldn't it be great if you could just vMotion your workload from your data center to the cloud? Well, that would be incredible and awesome and amazing and not possible, right? Fact of the matter is, that's what VMware Cloud on AWS offers. You actually can vMotion workloads from your data center into the cloud, and not just the VMs, but the entire load balancing environment, your network security environments, all of your permissions and rules, and we provide the same VMware Cloud services and ecosystem capabilities that you use today on the cloud. So it's a VMware service we offer and we stand up in an Amazon SDDC, in Amazon VPC, a software-defined data center. We then hand it over to you, and you can move your workloads in through vMotion, through our other technologies like HCX that help you do migration, or even Snowball or Snowmobile if you need it. So it really is phenomenal a way to move your workloads, your existing environments, to the cloud in a very quick fashion. I mentioned that it's the same rich services, both VMware services and AWS services that are available to you. It's consistent and familiar with the vSphere system that you've been using for 20 years now, some of you, 10 years for most of you. All the same interfaces are there, all the same products there. It's based off of commercial applications that are available, all of your integrations, your APIs, all of the tooling you've used, all our ecosystem partners that have built over the decades, it all works. Workload portability and hybrid capabilities, it has been described, the service has been described as the best and the most realistic hybrid cloud solution in the industry. And the reason for that is it's the same virtualization platform and technology on-prem as in the cloud. We link the networking using virtual networking, set up L2 VPNs, use your direct connect capabilities, and then it's easy to move workloads in and out of the cloud, but also stretch your networks so you don't even have to re-IP workloads when you move them into AWS. You get direct access to the power of native AWS services. You're here because you're already using AWS. You're also here because you probably have vSphere running somewhere. And so the reality of the future is that we're going to be doing both for a long time. And you want to take advantage of the 1,400 services that AWS launched last year and the probably 2,000 this year that's coming, as well as stay consistent with your operational procedures and manage the compliance certifications you have and the regulations you're under of your current workloads, and do it all in one place, which would be the perfect dream. The hybrid solution becomes a reality. And then using containers, using VMs, it's all becoming a mix. VMware offers container technologies and management technologies. AWS offers technologies. You can use whichever ones make the most sense for your environment. Whichever your developers want, whichever your team wants, your IT team wants to monitor, manage, it's all available. So what is this service really? So AWS came to the table and said, we will build bare metal hardware for you on our infrastructure if VMware will make sure that vSphere can install, deploy, and be executed on there. So we provide that. When we have a customer who comes to VMware and says, I would like a VMware Cloud on AWS instance, we initially set up a VPC, an Amazon VPC for you. We provision through APIs, bare metal hardware. We install vSphere, vSAN, and NSX, which is our virtualization, storage, networking, and compute technologies. We give you a copy of vCenter on there, and then we hand it over to you. And with that, you can link it to your on-prem environment, and you can either manage exclusively the cloud, or you can manage it from your existing vSphere instance. And the AWS data center just looks like one more data center in your already expanding network of data centers that you manage today. So you might have 4 or 5 data centers around the world. Now you add a VMware Cloud and AWS instance, and you have another one. And it operates the same. It just shows up. You can drag and drop your workloads. You can put all the same policies that you're doing today and expand them into that environment. But even better, our relationship with AWS lets you take advantage of all of their capabilities. So when we provision a SDDC or an environment for you, we put it as close physically as possible in the availability zones you're currently running. So performance and throughput is unbelievable, as you know AWS already delivers. And you have the access to all the services. So if you want Lambda or EC2 services or EBS services or S3 access from within your VMs, they're readily available for you. Got that? All right. This is a jointly engineered solution. So I know you can imagine that they just gave us hardware and we just installed vSphere, but AWS has a very extensive infrastructure and fabric that they've provided. And historically, they provide it with their own virtualization technology, and replacing that with VMware's vSphere was a massive engineering investment on AWS's side. And then VMware's investment to operate and management on the AWS environment was also equally as massive. But we have jointly come together to deliver a one-stop shop for our customers. One place to go to run everything you need to do in the cloud. We have currently announced our Oregon, Virginia, London, Frankfurt environments that are already up and running and operating. Sydney has been announced, and today we're announcing our GovCloud instance. Thank you. All right. Okay. So our customers have found a broad use of actual real-world use cases to use this service for. On-demand capacity is unprecedented. For us to deploy an entire SDDC for a customer, which you do with a click of a button, takes about an hour and a half. 4 hosts, bare metal, provisioned in your VPC, all of our software stack, and then we turn it over to you in about an hour and a half. To add a host, you click a button or call the API, either way. It takes about 5 minutes. And that's a host added to your vSphere cluster with ESX running on it, managed right within VC, magically shows up. And VMware is offering you this service on a hourly, 1 year, and a 3-year subscription basis. So a lot of our customers have bought a toehold or a pilot light in the cloud and said, okay, I need 4, 5, 10 hosts running. I'll pay for those for 3 years and then just scale out as I need to on an hourly basis, and then they never seem to scale down, but that's good for everybody. So that is game-changing in the industry for vSphere customers, specifically customers in this room. I challenge anyone to tell me, what the typical time frame is for you to get an extra host added to your vSphere cluster. Usually involves filling out a ticket, getting financial approval, ordering the hardware. 9 months later, something shows up, right? 5 minutes is pretty incredible. But customers are really leveraging this for DR strategies as well, or COOP strategies. Because the idea of not maintaining an entire data center somewhere that sits idle except the 3 times a year you run your tests is very, very financially attractive. So you can put a couple machines up in the cloud, you can replicate your data there, and then scale out on demand because AWS provides the infrastructure scaling capability as you need it. So when you have a real incident, you can go from 5 machines to 100. And it happens in a matter of minutes. So it's really, really amazing what customers have been able to do and then either use that as the DR environment or move their production workloads to the cloud and leverage their on-prem data centers as their DR environment. So it has changed the game, not only from a perspective of DR being a reality, because a lot of people have been cutting corners on that, but also changing how you think about DR. So you no longer have to keep a lot of bandwidth utilization, like 80% utilization of your servers, and keep that 20% in case of emergencies. You can just add hosts in 5 minutes when you need them, which also changes the equation. So you can push the utilization of your hardware up at a very high level and then expand out on demand as you need it. And when you can get servers in 5 minutes, it really changes things. So the other combination of use cases that people are typically using our service for is data center consolidation, or mergers and acquisitions happen, or if it's a split up, they suddenly need 2 data centers because they're segmenting the company in half and they need to spin up another data center. And they can do that very, very quickly with VMware Cloud on AWS. Have a cloud instance right away, replicate everything they have on production up to the cloud. The other company spins off and builds their own data center if they want, but in reality it's enabled that. Mergers, the same thing. You have twice as many employees, suddenly you need twice as much capacity, and you can spin it up very quickly. And then migration to the cloud is the typical migration story is how do I get my apps in there? And then the last one that really hits home for people is the next generation apps. So when I'm writing next generation apps and I'm doing test and development and I have this need to spin up applications, try the latest capabilities, et cetera, VMware Cloud and AWS gives you that capability to run your traditional apps and leverage the latest and greatest from both VMware and AWS. So with that unprecedented number of features, functionality, your developers can use what they want, your engineers can take advantage of it, your IT team can leverage some of the incredibly impressive security capabilities that AWS has, and Paul will talk about some of that later. But you can build your next generation platform on this while maintaining your environments today. Now, we have been rapidly innovating on this service. So we have been growing exponentially. We've had public sector customers, universities, state and local government entities, healthcare institutes, all of them coming on board the service. But just like AWS, we have been adding features and functions at a very rapid cloud pace. Last August is when we launched the service. I came here and presented last year. There were about a third of the room, or Paul presented, but I was in the room with him, and it was about a third of the room. And this year, we get much larger attention. But when we started in 1 data center in Oregon. We had 4 host clusters, and we had hybrid link mode, which enabled the hybrid use case. In November, we added the Virginia region. We scaled up to 32 hosts. We added 1 in 3-year subscriptions. We enabled direct connect to work, so you're networking when you finally convince your IT team to allow you to connect to AWS, you can leverage all your network connections for the service. Site recovery we enabled, and HCX, which is our hybrid cloud capabilities to move workloads. In March, we expanded into EMEA with London. We added an MSP program. Like everybody else, we got to take credit cards. It's cloudy, so we enable credit cards. We turned on our vSAN deduplication and compression. And why this is so important is what we provision for you are dedicated physical hardware in the Amazon data centers. And we're using local storage. So there's not a more secure environment you can imagine where it's a physically dedicated box with a vSphere security layer on top of it, surrounded by the AWS security capabilities. It's a perfect, coming of three great security-conscious technologies and capabilities all in one. And but you do have a limitation of storage on those hosts because if you need more storage, you currently have to add another host. vSAN dedupe and compression enabled a significant amount of increased utilization. And then just this past June, just this month, we added the Frankfurt region, support for multiple AZ SDDCs. So you can run your VMware workloads, stretch across 2 availability zones, and achieve unbelievable application availability. So if 2 AZs in Amazon, you know how reliable they are, but by stretching across 2 AZs, you can get to very high level of SLAs and application capabilities. Multi-cluster support, so you can add multiple clusters in one SDDC. Single host SDDCs. So if you want to just do test environments, you can spin up a single environment, try it for a month, shut it down, and it's not a big deal. No one's running production on single host, but we definitely wanted to enable people to kick the tires. Mm-hmm. Elastic DRS, which allows you to scale out and scale in as you need to dynamically. VM host affinity, because a lot of licensing requires you to stick certain workloads on certain hosts. And then Horizon 7.5 we announced, which is the VDI solution working in VMware Cloud on AWS. But we've also been busy in our compliance and certifications. We just announced our ISO 2701, 2717, 2718 certifications, our SOC 1, 2, and 3 certifications. We are also GDPR compliant. We can sign HIPAA BAAs. We did the CSA self-assessment, and we're working on FedRAMP. So what does that mean? So VMware is standing up, and this was our announcement today, so I'm just going to give you the details behind the marketing splash. We are standing up a completely separate instance of VMware Cloud in order to FedRAMP certify it. Okay? I know this is going to come as a shock to you, but we're calling it VMware Cloud on AWS GovCloud. I'm not marketing, just product management. So the key to this is we are setting up and hiring US persons on US soil to run our operations team, our security operations center, and we're leveraging our existing federal global support and services team to offer support and handle calls, just like they do today for our federal and public sector customers. If you need a US-based team, we have that available today, and we're just expanding their scope to include VMware Cloud on AWS GovCloud. We are working to obtain a FedRAMP Plus High certification. We are working to meet the requirements for a PA for impact level 4 and 5. And we expect to be compliant with the ITAR regulations. Now, next question I get is when, right? So we currently are running our service in GovCloud in our development team. We have hardware in multiple AZs. We are operating, and we can run VMs, run workloads, and we are honestly working out some of the operational production kinks and getting through the controls necessary to get our certifications. We plan to make the instance in GovCloud generally available in the second half of this year. We are targeting to be FedRAMP High ready, for those of you very familiar with the FedRAMP process. We expect that to be the second half of this year and to be in process with an agency for a FedRAMP High ATO, with our sponsoring agency. After that, and once we get in process, we'll be working on our ITAR certification and training, the DoD paperwork for that impact levels. We are looking at taking our entire instance and potentially replicating it in the future in AWS East-West to offer a moderate, FedRAMP moderate offering, but there's no schedule for that one right now. We hear there's some demand, but we're targeting FedRAMP High first. And then we will leverage all of our FedRAMP certifications for CGIS compliance. Now, a lot of people have told us that seems, let me go on this first. So the service itself, one of the most common things that people say is, well, when you set up a separate instance, it always lags behind the commercial instance, and then I always get caught without features. So VMware is working very hard to prevent that. We know that that's not what the GovCloud community wants and the public sector community wants. So we are committed to offering the same fundamental functionality, which is actually pretty easy for us because it's same hardware, just in a different region. It's the same VMware stack, so vSAN, NSX, vSphere, unchanged. It's a commercial version that just runs. We are deploying from the same code base, so we're just installing it into our current region and then moving it over to GovCloud. There are minor differences, however, between the two, and they're not going to be surprising to anybody who understands FedRAMP. We've had to change a little bit about our onboarding process because before we can give you a VMware Cloud on AWS GovCloud instance, we have to make sure you're allowed to have a GovCloud instance. So we're working with AWS to do that. We will be linking to your GovCloud instance so you can leverage your GovCloud services from AWS. There are some authentication changes that have to be in place. We are enabling multi-factor authentication, supporting CAC and PIV cards as needed. And then there are a couple features in our service like in-product support with a little chat icon that we currently leverage a third-party SaaS service for that isn't FedRAMP certified, so that's going to be tossed out until we can figure it out. But that's not critical to the service. So we expect fundamental functionality and features to 100% be there. You'll be able to operate your workloads just like a commercial service. And in fact, if you want to see what the service is like and experience it, try the commercial service today. And when this becomes available, it'll be real easy and very familiar. Okay. Now, a lot of people have asked how this is possible to do in such an aggressive time frame, and they chuckle when I usually show the time slide. But fact of the matter is VMware is leveraging all of the certifications and technical capabilities of AWS. So they have a FedRAMP High platform for us to build on in GovCloud. They have an enormous number of security features like AWS config and guard duty, all sorts of other capabilities that we can take advantage of. And then on top of that, we're running the vSphere platform, which most public sector customers, including DoD and other communities, have already vetted very heavily. So between those two and the fact that we're running on bare metal hardware, we get a lot of advantages when preparing our documentation for our certifications. And we get to leverage that. We also have great relationships with the agencies. We have great relationships with the JAB already and with AWS. And without their help, it wouldn't be possible to do what we're doing and get it done in the time frame. But we have a high level of confidence that we're on the right path. Now with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Paul Bockelman from AWS and let him give you the AWS perspective as well as some of the technical details behind how the service works.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks, everybody. So we're at an AWS conference. We need to talk about it from an AWS perspective as well. So what's happening underneath the covers? A couple different technical items that we like to point out here first. Jason's done a great job articulating what the stack is. Let's talk a little bit more about it. So it's on demand. This is not something you need to pre-provision. You need to go and pre-buy. It's an on-demand service. If you want additional ESX hosts, you just purchase the ESX host, issue the API call, and it's paid for on demand. And you'll have the latest software. And the capacity is dynamic. When we say this, it seems like there's a lot of hand waving around that saying, oh, it's just dynamic. No, it really is dynamic capacity. So when you can add an ESX node in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it ends up being, and then you can actually contract the size of these nodes, dynamic capacity becomes a real factor in how you run your operations. And so if we look at how this stack has been built. From a compute perspective, the hardware is based off of our i3-16XL instance family type, same specifications. So we're talking 72 virtual cores, 512 gigabytes of RAM, and it has 15 terabytes of raw NVMe flash storage per host. So these things are pretty high performing. And we have in all of our regions have been upgraded to take advantage of having 25 gigabit network capability. So You get full access to that bandwidth. Obviously, it depends on what you're communicating to as to what the rate is that you're going to actually transfer, but you have full access to these capabilities that are native to AWS. And so we take that, we add the VMware hypervisor to that. You can go scale from 4 nodes up to 30 nodes, 32 nodes in a cluster, and you can do up to 10 clusters. So you can start to get a lot of hardware access really quickly to run your workloads. Now, a couple things to keep in mind is that this is a managed cloud offering. Somebody is operating the hypervisor on your behalf, so things like SSH to the host is not going to be possible. It's not something that's been abstracted away from the customer because from the hypervisor perspective, there's nothing for you to manage. You manage everything above the hypervisor. And so when you're looking at third-party software products that you may be running in your existing VMware environment today, there's no VIBs or plugins that are going to be allowed to be put in because you don't have that level of access into the environment. So you look at that, that can be good and bad. I've actually seen it really as a positive because within the ISV ecosystem, it's kind of become a forcing function for them to look back at their software and say, are we really running our solution in the most efficient or most effective way? Can we run in a reduced permissions model? And so many of the vendors, particularly in the backup space, have quickly adapted their product to be able to run in a reduced permissions mode and have become certified for this platform. I talked a little bit about the storage. So vSAN is managing all of your storage. It's consuming the NVMe flash storage that's on hosts. And while EBS is not available, you can mount EFS for shared storage from your VMs. So currently, you're not going to go into the hypervisor, or rather into vCenter, and make a request to attach another data store that's EFS backed. No, as a VM, if you want to actually target an NFS mount point that's on EFS, you can do that. And from a networking, so we have the NSX logical networking, the virtual networking that comes with NSX. The full stack has been deployed into the region. We're slowly releasing the advanced capabilities around that. But this is full network virtualization stack, which, as Jason mentioned earlier, we can be able to support things like your stretched networks and the ability to vMotion a machine from on-prem into the cloud and maintain IP addresses and things like that. And then the vSphere is managed for you. Now, when I say it's managed, the vSphere is, the management component is, do I have a healthy ESX host? The patching, the maintenance, things like that. As a subscriber to the service, you subscribe to a certain amount of capacity. Well, because it's a managed service, VMware makes sure that that capacity number is maintained for you. So if there is a degradation of a piece of hardware or there's a patch that's happening during the maintenance window, hardware will be added into your cluster to make sure that you can maintain your minimum set of resources that you subscribe to while the other maintenance is occurring. So this is a pretty big advantage for customers. So when we look at the account, it's important to understand the account structure that's happening here. There's 2 accounts. There's a VMware account. It's an AWS account that is managed for you as the customer, but VMware owns it. And what does this mean? Well, a couple different things. One is when you launch a cluster and you say, I have a 4-node cluster, and you know that there are EC2 instances that are underpinning that cluster, you cannot go into your AWS account and just look at that EC2 instance. You won't see it running there because it's running inside of an account that's owned and operated by VMware on your behalf. Also, the bill. So for that EC2 infrastructure, you're not receiving a bill for the AWS services that are used to deliver this service to you. That all comes through your VMware subscription. Now, you do have a customer-owned account that's required. So the account that you may be using today, that's an existing account. There's nothing special about these accounts. They're the same accounts you're using today, or it can be a new one. The difference between the 2 accounts on the screen here is the one on the bottom you control. You have full access to do whatever it is that you want to do or need to do into that account. From a technical perspective, when the provisioning occurs, the access between accounts is made available through some networking that I'm going to detail here in a second. And so quickly, how do you access this? So from a ordering and a provisioning process, once that you've actually gone through the ordering process, you can go in and manage and build your clusters using the VMware console. You can do things like add additional host nodes. change the size of the cluster. You could do firewalling, request public IPs, things like that. Set up your VPN, your NATing capabilities going into the cluster. And then you have the vSphere H5 client. So the vSphere that you're using today, the same vSphere technology is being used here in this environment to manage it. So if you're an administrator and you want to do things at the vSphere level, you have access to do that through the web console. Now, if you're doing a lot of things through APIs and it's code driven, you can still do that as well. You're not forced to go through these mechanisms only. And so real quick, pictures resonate for people. So when you order the service, what does it look like? What are you getting from a VMware, or I'm sorry, an AWS perspective? So let's take a look at what the base topology is. So the first account that I detailed a minute ago was that there's a VMware owned and managed account. And so what ends up gets through the provisioning process, your ESX nodes are deployed with the hypervisor, the NSX controls, the NSX environment, the vSAN, all of that is all automatically provisioned for you per the interview that you do, through the wizard, if you would, through the provisioning process. And it's sitting inside of a VMware or AWS environment. So VPC is your underlay network. Where before you had a different physical network with your underlay, VPC is your underlay. And then you have your account, the bottom account that we talked about. This is your standard AWS account. This is the account that you would use, that you're probably using today. Now, if you'll notice in the center of the screen, you have a compute gateway that has been deployed into the overlay network, which also has wiring or plumbing, if you would, virtually, into your VPC, which allows communication between the overlay network in the SDDC account and your native AWS account. You connect up your data centers. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And now, so this is just a base topology where your users begin to access data in the commercial offering, whatever it may be. You would go through Internet Gateway. Or you can have private connectivity back to your data center. And so if we launch application stack, as a VMware customer, you can do everything you want to do on the left-hand side of the screen. You technically wouldn't have to even use the right-hand side of the screen. But it's an option, and what we do is we love to give our users and customers options. And so we're talking federal now. Or, we're talking public sector, but the big portion of this population of this conference are folks that have CAP or TIC requirements. So connectivity, big deal, right? So one of the things that you'll notice here, this is an oversimplification, you have your government's network going into the co-location facility through Direct Connect using CAP TIC that exists in that environment. It's the same CAP and TIC that you would use today, no different. But then the connectivity that goes from that CAP and TIC goes into your environment is it's using Direct Connect, and you have a virtual private gateway. One of the big things with Impact Level 4, as we know with the DoD, or for requirements with federal for using TIC, anything that's sensitive, any workloads cannot go over an internet gateway. Have to flow through a CAP or a TIC. And so if we take a look at the architecture and we revisit, if you'll notice at the top of the screen, where we had an internet gateway in the SDDC, that's been replaced with a virtual private gateway. And so as we build out this environment and say we wanted to scale one of the applications, if we add additional nodes in the VMware environment, add a clustered file system, or a shared file system rather. In this example, I just actually use a AWS storage gateway with S3 backed object storage as the endpoint to connect to for our shared file system for a web application. And then I offloaded my database, moved over into Aurora. Aurora sitting in the native account. This is the same Aurora that we use today, no different. And then the endpoints were connected up. So we really start to see how hybrid really becomes a reality, how it comes to fruition very quickly in this environment. Jason, when we kicked off the presentation, talked about, sometimes it's a matter of you've got forces outside of your organization or forcing your organization to close what you're running. You have to do mass migrations, your big migrations. You can actually do the migrations and then start to become hybrid if that's what you choose to do. The nice thing about this environment, there's a lot of nice things about it, but one of the things I like to do and like to tell customers is that it's okay to not have the end state answer figured out before you start. You can get into the environment and then figure out, do we need to refactor, do we need to break things down, or do we just leave it as is? It's okay to make changes as you're going along. You can be very agile. And so we want to take some minutes here at the end of the presentation to actually have one of our customers come up that has onboarded onto the service and is operating the service currently. Mark from MIT is going to come up and give you his voice, his take on it. We've asked them to really just kind of tell us why the organization has made the decision and how it's affecting the organization. Sir? Thank you.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. Thanks for the chance to be here today. It's my first visit to Washington, D.C., and one thing I never planned for on my trip over here today was protests. So it was a little bit of an adventure. Hopefully none of you went through that. But as you know, Boston, where we're from up at MIT, has a lot of exciting things going on. These are the kinds of disruptions we actually don't plan for. So we worry about data center outages and fiber cuts and all sorts of things, but this is never in our risk pool. So a little bit of an adventure here today. So happy to be here. Talking a little bit about MIT. Everyone knows who MIT is? Yeah, Massachusetts Institute of Technology up north. And I got there in the mid-90s as a student. And it's been an incredible place to be. I can tell you, MIT, first and foremost, is always pushing the leading edge. It's always pushing us as an organization, as an IT provider, to try and give them the very best resources to try and tackle the world's problems. That is first and foremost what MIT is about. MIT's mission, quite simply, we're trying to use science, engineering, and technology to try to tackle the world's problems. That is what MIT is about. We're a problem-solving institution, and that means one of the most important things we do as an IT organization is give them the tools to do that. So the cloud is really a unique opportunity for us. It's the opportunity to totally rethink how we do our business from top to bottom as an IT industry. I think everyone's kind of going through this, and people are at different points in the progression of their journey. We've decided, a couple years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, we were going to be a cloud-first organization, and we were going to leverage the cloud everywhere we could. And that has different kinds of impacts, right? It means you could adopt more SaaS services, things like Office 365. Could mean you adopt all sorts of IaaS services like AWS. And we've kind of done a ton of work in that area. And for us, one of the biggest challenges we face is we have a large existing data center footprint in our premise, and numbering about 3,000 VMs when we started. And taking those applications as they stand, a lot of Oracle databases, a lot of ERPs, you can imagine all those kinds of things. I'm sure you have a lot of them. Just picking them up and moving them as is very difficult, right? It sounds simple, but when you get into the details, you're potentially faced with having to refactor a lot of that application. And that's a big lift. That's a huge lift. So one of the things we really looked to was hybrid cloud. Can we build enough connectivity and interoperability and integration between our premise private cloud using VMware vCloud Air or vSphere, or I think it was called ESX back then. And can we use that as a gateway to get us into the actual public cloud in a hybrid style? And we started working with VMware on this back when it was called vCloud Air. And we were one of, I think, the earliest adopters. And over a period of about, probably close to 2 or 3 years, we migrated our entire environment, all 3,000 VMs, from our premise data centers in Cambridge, Massachusetts, out to facilities in Jersey City and in California. And it was an amazing endeavor, and a lot of people told us we couldn't do it, right? We're very fortunate to have a very talented staff. First and foremost, they really made that happen. They did an incredible job. And once we got there, I think the first thing you start to realize is, this is step one, but this is just the beginning of the journey. And for us, VMware's root business was never going to be a cloud provider, right? Or software company. And so one of the things we wanted was, we're there now, but we want some of the advantages of all the things, you get from someone like Amazon. So when they came to us and said, guess what? We're talking about doing something with Amazon where we can give you the power of Amazon and make that a seamless transition, it's like a match made in heaven, right? It almost sounded too good to be true. Pat Gelsinger, mentioned this to us, and we were just amazed. And, it was like, all right, let's see if this is actually possible. And what I can tell you is we started working with the VMC platform back last fall. And from that point in time until where I stand here today, we have migrated almost all 3,000 of our virtual servers from vCloud Air into VMC. And we've been able to do that in a zero downtime, completely transparent fashion to our users, which I think is a great credit to the work that the AWS team has done and the work that the VMware team has done. They've truly done an incredible job. When you see it in action, it's like magic. And I remember our team showing us, the first time they started doing these large, cloud-to-cloud migrations. And they would take a web server or an application, simply point and click, and move it literally from our cloud in, say, Jersey City over to US East Virginia. No downtime, dropped one ping packet. It's kind of incredible when you see it. I think all the amazing complexity and effort that went into it from these talented teams sometimes gets lost because it looks so easy, but these guys deserve a ton of credit. They did an absolutely amazing job. And it's been incredible for us. So we were able, in a period of a couple months, to migrate our entire environment to both the US West 2 facility and the US East 1 facility. And it's been an incredible journey for us. We're really now in a position where we can start to think about not just the things we were doing with VMware, we can actually start to think about some of the opportunities this enables with using native AWS services, which is really the next part of the horizon for us. And it's actually very exciting because I think, for us, there's a whole world of opportunities. I mean, AWS and Amazon sit at the real core of our teaching and research mission. And, we have students, faculty doing all sorts of incredible things with Amazon. And for the first time, we can also bring a lot of that capability to what we're doing as an IT provider and hopefully give those things to our community, which will be a huge win for MIT. Because ultimately, MIT, I love the work we've done in the IT area, but this transformation, this cloud migration, this whole change in our industry is a unique opportunity to take our scarce resources as IT organizations and refocus them on the problems that are really unique to our individual enterprises, companies, and universities. And we can put the hands of our people in doing those things and turn over the work of that infrastructure to Amazon and VMware, who are doing an absolutely incredible job. So this has been a fantastic opportunity, and I hope everyone gives it a try because it's been incredible for us.
All right. Thanks a lot. That was awesome. Appreciate it. All right, thanks, Mark. Really appreciate that. And it's not just us talking about it. Having customers talk about it means a tremendous amount to us. So with that said, there's additional information about the service you can find online. If you're interested in VMware Cloud on AWS GovCloud, there's a link there specifically, or you can talk to VMware, your VMware account team, or AWS about it. And then last but not least, I'm asked to remind you to complete the session survey, please. And thank you. We will be outside taking questions to anybody who has them. So thank you.